Nicholas calls. And wow, that's pretty sick. That's a pretty sick cooler. OTB versus True Teller. 200, 400, 68k stacks. True Teller makes it 900 this time, so he goes a bit, he made it a bit smaller. OTB goes with a small 3-bet, a little bit over 9 big blinds, and True Teller calls. Flops queen, queen 9, which is kind of dry, right? So both guys will have a decent amount of queens, both guys will have some 9s and straight draws, but also a whole lot of nothing. OTB bets a little over a quarter of the pot. Seems fine, you know, on such a dry lockdown board. And True Teller raises. So he's basically saying he's got a queen or better, and not even always, right? So he wants to play for stacks. And now we enter the land of sickness, where most people will be like, do I call, do I fold? No, OTB just clicks it back. And True Teller clicks it back. So he clicks it back, and let's see what OTB does. It would be sick if he just goes all in. Pio is already taken off for today. Pio's got a long weekend. This is a freestyle so far. So OTB calls the 4-bet on the flop, I guess. Yeah. And he should not have any leads on the 3, right? Because True Teller is saying he's got a really, really strong hand now. And I don't think on a super dry board like this, you need to have any leads. OTB checks. And True Teller checks. Which is kind of strange, right? Because, like, he 4-bets the flop to 25k, but then he doesn't want to bet the turn, right? Like, why not bet really, really small? So maybe he's strapping with, like, something like queen 9 or 9s, or he's checking back a hand like ace queen. I think, like, ooh, like, maybe I'm not even ahead somehow. So, or, you know, he's like, oh, there's less than pot behind, I don't need to bet anymore. He could also just be bluffing. The 10 does improve both players a little bit, I guess. Normally, I would say quite a bit if this were just bet call, but after the 4-bet and the call on the flop, you know, it's hard to, I don't even know what to think anymore. OTB checks, so he's probably like, this guy made a 25k with a 4-bet on the flop, and now he checks behind. Like, I think he's either bluffing or he just checked back the nuts, so I don't want to bet. I'm just going to go into check call mode. True Teller does shove. OTB doesn't believe him. True Teller shows up with 9s, and OTB with ace queen. Interesting. So pre-flop is very standard. Ace queen suited is 100% 3-bet, heads up. And 9s, you could even 4-bet sometimes, but generally you want to call. And when we go back to the flop, so OTB, despite having trips, just bets small. He bets small, hoping to get value from some weaker hands. And True Teller raised, so with basically the nuts, he's thinking, well, I don't have a queen in my hand. I want to get called by a queen. I want to get called by hands like Jack 10, King Jack, etc. And OTB is thinking he wants to click it back because he unblocks all air and all the backdoor type of stuff. And he doesn't want True Teller to just get there cheaply. And True Teller's like, well, at this point, I really believe I has a queen. So maybe if I click it back, it will look less like the nuts than if I just slow play. And OTB is like, well, okay, fine. Maybe you have pocket 9s or queen 9, but I can't fold this one. True Teller has plenty of hearts. On the turn, he checks it behind, which I don't mind either. And then, you know, he's like, well, now I got a ship, and OTB is not loving it, but he calls. So I get the line. I'll give them both a 7 out of 10. But there's definitely some clicking going on right there. Right here, we've got our first hand. It looks like Stefan is raising under the gun, because only Stefan would use this sizing. I don't even have to see his name. Yeah, it is Stefan, I was right. So, why is he using such a large sizing, you would ask, right? Most people go like 200 here, maybe 250. Why is he using such a large sizing? So he must be adjusting to one of the players, and he must be thinking, hey, these guys play way too many hands, and they don't really care if I make it 100 more or less. They're just going to call me anyway. So I'm going to make the pot nice and large, which under the right circumstances is a cool idea. So Isik defends in the big blind, and when he defends versus such a large sizing versus under the gun, he's going to have a pretty strong range. I mean, he's getting very bad odds, and, you know, he's not going to have amazing equity versus a tight opening range. Stefan goes for a small bet on a very dry board, which is kind of good for him, right? I mean, he's going to have sevens and a queen a lot and pairs and, you know, good backdoor hands. So it makes sense to c-bet here. And Isik calls, which can be fine, can be terrible, depending on the hand. 5 doesn't change a whole lot other than exactly pocket 5s. I guess queen 5 suited, well, no, that's actually not relevant. I mean, queen 5 suited is already blocked by the board. So Stefan actually goes for a 2x pot bet almost, which is kind of unorthodox. So at this point, he's saying, I've got at least a queen. It's very difficult to value bet a hand like 10s here and expect to get called. But Isik calls again. River's an ace, which changes things a little bit again. Stefan definitely is not going to bet hands like aces on the turn for this sizing, but he may have a hand like ace-queen, which now improved to a full house. So I'm expecting Stefan to go for a very big bet here, and in fact, he shoves all in. So he's really saying, hey, I've got ace-queen, 5s, 7s, maybe he's got a hand like king-queen, and he just thinks it's good always. Very interesting line. Wow. Sick. Okay, so Stefan raised under the gun with 5s. Obviously, he would raise this hand. It's easily good enough. Well, it's actually a little bit closer than you would think. You know, some of these low pairs are overvalued, but pocket 5s is not the lowest pair. And on the flop, easy value bet for, you know, easy value bet. Need a lot of protection. So, and on the turn in the river, I mean, he just milked this guy to the max. He must have thought, wow, I think this guy is a queen, and I think he's not going to fold. And Isiko has queen 8 offsuit. In theory, you probably cannot fold to this aggressive line, but then again, I mean, it is a really aggressive line. Queen 8 off, I probably would just fold pre-flop. I mean, yeah, your hand is somewhat connected, but not that connected. You're also not suited, so yeah, I would fold pre-flop. I'll give Stefan an 8.5 out of 10. I'll give Isik a 7.5 out of 10. I don't like the pre-flop defend, but I don't mind check calling sometimes with trips on the flop. That's a cool play. And on the turn, he obviously cannot fold with trips. And on the river, well, he must have thought, well, ace-queen is now less likely. I can still beat some random bluffs. I'm gonna call. So it's a little bit of a loose call. You know, you can even find a fold with a queen here sometimes, but I cannot really blame him for calling against a loose aggressive player. So yeah, very fun hand to start with, and you know, definitely not unexpected coming from Stefan, who is a very creative player. But that's a good thing, right? Being creative is a good thing sometimes. Back to another hand, micro stakes, aka Doug Polk open raises. Before it was 916, now it's 948. Doug is really going full hipster today. Maybe because Daniel's a little bit deeper. Daniel goes for an almost 11 big blind 3-bet. Seems fine. And the man with the America flag calls. 4 bets. Okay, almost. Pretty large sizing here. I mean, they are about 64k deep, so it makes sense for Doug to increase his sizing a little bit. Daniel's not getting the greatest price here, but then again, they are a little bit deeper. And that is a really good flop for Doug. Obviously, he's going to have aces here every time. He may even bluff 4-bet a hand like ace-8 offsuit or even ace-8, ace-4 suited. He's going to have hands like ace-king and maybe ace-queen suited. You know, a hand like kings is obviously not loving this board, but it's still not terrible. So I'm expecting a lot of small bets here. Definitely under 10k, but somewhere more in like the 6k range, I would imagine. 5k it is. Close enough. Let's see if Daniel check raises here. Would be a cool play. Daniel does not. Obviously, again, a great card. I mean, it doesn't really change too much. I mean, Doug is even more happy now if he has a hand like ace-king. It does make aces less likely, of course. It makes ace-king less likely because there's one less ace out there. But then again, you're pretty happy here. If Doug were to bet, I'm expecting a pretty small bet. I mean, the board is so dry. You know, you just want to charge something like a mid pair if you have a good ace. You want to charge like a flush draw, combo draw. Makes sense. Good bet by Doug. And if Daniel has an ace, you know, he definitely cannot fold right now. Maybe he can find a fold. Damn. Maybe he can find a fold on the river, but definitely not now. I mean, it's even possible that Doug is making some type of thin value bet with a hand like jacks or queens. 4 definitely changes things a little bit. I could see Daniel maybe making a stubborn call with hand like 5-4 suited, but more relevant than that is the flush, right? I mean, I could definitely see Daniel having a hand like king queen of spades to call the turn with. But then, it's like the best worst card. Yes, you improve to your flush, but if Doug is an ace, he still beats you. I'm expecting a shove by Doug if he does bet. I don't see Doug betting a hand like queens here for value, so he's shoving an ace or better. Can he shove with a flush? It's kind of tough, right? I mean, you have the best hand a decent amount, but what are you getting called by? And I don't really see Doug having a 4 here very often. So yeah, he's shoving an ace or nothing. Wow. Okay. Really nice hand. Okay, so Doug ends up 4-betting the queen jack offsuit, so they must have seen some type of chart where queen jack loves to be 4-bet, and he actually triples here, thinking, well, I block a flush, which Daniel may somehow call with king jack of spades. Primarily, I block ace queen, so it's just more likely that Daniel made some kind of stubborn call with hand like pocket tens or jacks on the turn. So Doug bluffed this one through. It's quite aggressive, but then again, I think it's it shows good heart, right? Doug doesn't have a whole lot of bluffs anymore. He has a lot of value bets, so it's a strong play. I'll give him a 9 out of 10. Daniel 3-bet, called a 4-bet, strong play. He definitely could have check raised the flop, but other than that, definitely no way to fold. So I'll give Daniel a 9 out of 10 as well. Yeah, nice play. Nice play by both guys, and a lot of heart shown by Doug for sure. Obviously, Doug is very unhappy bluffing here, but then again, he doesn't think he can show down here and ever win. So, but then again, he blocks a hand like ace jack and ace queen very well, and even a hand like king jack of spades. Spool min raises the button. We've seen him go 2 point, we've seen him go 3x in fact. So I'm not sure if that's just because he's on the button, because he's deeper, or maybe because he wants to make the pot a bit smaller. Maybe he's got a weaker hand. Maybe he's strapping with a stronger hand. Can be a million things. Anyway, big blind bets goes for a 14 big blind 3-bet, which is quite a big
humongous, right?
So maybe he does it because of the stack size. Maybe he believes his opponent is calling a lot of 3-bets, or maybe he's just got a great hand and he's trying to get some more money into the pot. But I mean, he's got an Elon Musk avatar, so it must be a good strategy. So we see an 8-8-3, like a 9-9-3 flop. I'm sorry, which is pretty good board for both of them. As in, big blind bets is not gonna have as many 9s as spooled, but at the same time, the 3 is not that worrisome, and there's not much else going on, right? So what would you do on this flop? Just be quite aggressive?
Yeah, I think you can still bet here fairly often. I don't know if he's going to range bet, but he can still bet fairly often. Overall, you're still going to have an advantage. Probably have a few bit more, especially the stacked up, maybe higher nut flush hands. So yeah, I think you can bet here pretty often.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Let's see what big blind bets does. I'm expecting a small to medium sized bet. Small it is.
We got a call here.
I mean, this is just the best card ever for big blind bets, right? Because he's representing bigger overpairs, and a 9 is now very unlikely for best spooled, and also pocket 3s are no longer beating overpairs. So, I mean, big blind bets can just go to town here. He can just bet something like 12k on the turn and just shovel in, and he can be bluffing with over cards like Jack 10, etc. And obviously, he can very happily barrel queens. And if occasionally he loses to 9, so be it. But he can still get called by many lower pairs, etc.
Exactly, and spools, a lot of his range is going to be in a lot of pain. Specifically his bluff catchers, his under pairs to the 9. Even a hand maybe with some decent blocking effects like ace queen is not going to be really happy putting in a lot of money because, like you said, it's just a great card for big blinds overall range. So I expect a bet here. Mm-hmm. Not maybe, but probably won't range bet, but decently often.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Big blind bets does check, so he's saying I've given up, or I've got a hand like ace high, for instance, that just wants to get the showdown, and occasionally I'm trapping a hand like aces or 9 maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Check. If spool had a full house, he would usually bet the turn, so he's saying he's also mostly got like a missed flush draw or some kind of float, like Jack 10 of diamonds that missed. Deuce doesn't change much. All right, so we see a sub 10% pod bet. With this bet size, you could even value bet as thinly as ace high, perhaps, and definitely any pair. So interesting play by big blind bets. And his bluffs, I mean, you can obviously pick some kind of random air hand, right? Like 6, 7 suited, etc. So Spooled goes for the raise here, and he's basically saying like, hey, I checked behind the 9, I'm trapping you, or he checked behind a hand like 10s, he was afraid of getting check raised, or he just didn't see much value, but now against his sub 10% pot button, he does see value. So he's representing a pretty thin range for value. Do you think he's bluffing?
I do expect a lot of the under pairs to stab turn. Just for protection, but also he could be, of course, being a little bit more worried about facing a check raise. I do think he might even go, versus that sizing, maybe he goes even a little bit thinner than 10s. Maybe he's doing this with, he thinks big blind's range is very weak, or even contains a lot of ace high that might, bet call. So it could be maybe even a hand like 8s or 7s, although I think he would usually bet them for protection. So
I agree.
We'll see. Yeah.
And it would be sick if big blind bets now shoves in like ace high to rep aces or kings.
Right. That's the thing. I think that's what makes it nervous, because I think he's definitely a good enough player to obviously bet 3-bet all in, or bet as a bluff too. So it's a tough spot. And then I'm interested to see what they got.
Ouch. That was ownage.
So wow. The induce, yes. Well, the induce, obviously.
The classic induce, the 40-year-old induce. So ace king is a standard 3-bet, good bet on the flop. Turn is fine to check. And on the river, well, big blind bets probably thought that the button's range is quite weak, and so he value bet very thinly, which is a cool, funky, unorthodox play. I like it. And then, he sees this raise and he thinks, well, I've seen this player fast play a lot. I don't think he's really capable of checking back many full houses. I'm just going to call. It's very easy to overbluff, right? With like miss flush draws and just random misses. And Spooled, he opened 8-5 off on the button. That's quite loose. He called the 3-bet, which is looser. He called the flop, which is also quite loose. On the river, his hand is actually not the worst to bluff with. It's not the best to bluff with. It's not horrendous. But obviously, if you get here with 8-5 off, you get here with all types of offsuit combinations that aren't very good. So in the end, you're going to be over bluffing. I'll give big blind bets I'll give him a 9.5 out of 10. I think it's a pretty sweet play. I'll give Spooled a 3. What do you think?
A 3. I really like big blinds bets play, and especially considering how wide Spool is. Like, I think he played it pretty close to perfect, 9.75. I especially like the pre-flop sizing, considering how wide Spooled was calling, and then Spooled. I'll be nice, because he did show some heart on the river, so I'll give him a 3.5 out of 10.
Okay.
Generous, but I if you're gonna get to the river with 8-5 offsuit, you should go for it, I guess.
Sure, why not? No, in fact, I'm going to change my opinion and say that big blind bet should get a 10 out of 10. So Christopher Brewer, who I believe is an American live reg, opens a small blind. He made it just 3.5 big blinds, not 3, because there's more money out there, which means there's more money out there for people to fight for. So he doesn't want to give him a discount. Victor's going to 3-bet, 22K. That's a pretty standard sizing. And Chris Brewer with the top of Ivy's head, 4 bets. So again, aggressive dynamic, right? Aggressive open raises, aggressive 3-bets means aggressive 4-bets equals aggressive calls and shoves. So, Victor is getting, a decent price to play in position. They're also a little bit deeper. There's still, about 110 big blinds effective post-flop, and there's already over half a stack in there. Now, Chris is obviously super happy about this board. He's going to have aces every time, queens every time. He's going to have some hands like ace king and ace queen. Maybe he 4-bet bluffs with like a suited ace, or, even if he has kings. It's obviously not the greatest board, but it's not the worst one either. So Chris goes very small. Obviously, the board is not super dry, but not super draw heavy either. And he knows he's way ahead. And now, tough spot here. What is Brewer going to do? I think he's going to do a lot of checking, and then he's mostly going to bet small again. He might also shuffle in sometimes, right? There's less than pot behind. But checking is going to be his most frequent play. And now Victor's got a thing like, hey, can I get value here? Chris can definitely have good hands to check here, like sats and good top pairs, whatnot. So I'm going to bet quite thinly. I'm going to bet quite polarized here, as I've got a very good hand or I've got a very bad hand. Very good or very bad, very polarized here. So, and now, on the river, you know, something like 6, 7 of clubs gets there. And, you know, in Victor's shoes, 7 deuce is always possible. But at the same time, it's like King Jack, Jack 10 missed, all those straight draws, couple of flush draws. So Victor still has plenty of bluffs at his disposal to shove with. Victor does shove. I think that's probably his only bet size. There's only a bit over a half pot behind. Chris is thinking about it, so he probably has something like an ace. Oh, wow. Never gets old, does it? So Victor 3-bet the 7 deuce. I'm not sure why. I saw him open raise that hand in a 100K tournament. He probably has some kind of running gag with a buddy. Or like, you know, every time he wins a big pot, he gets paid some money or something. Who knows what? But yeah, he 3-bet called a 4. But obviously this is like a fuck you play. And Chris must be shaking his head, right? Thinking like, what the fuck? You know, if he has aces, you know, he still put aces, fair. You know, if he called a 4-bet of ace queen and he got me, fair. But he got me with the fucking 7 deuce. So obviously legendary pot. There's no need to rate this hand, right? There's no need to rate it. No need. So yeah, really epic hand. All right, so we've got a 245 open raise by Linus. He really wants to save that $5. Seems like a fine sizing. It's what I would use when playing heads up. So I'm glad to see that at least I've got a couple of things in common with their heads up game. And limitless defense, which he's going to do with a wide range. There's only one opponent to worry about, so he's getting a good price to call, but obviously he is out of position. Rake's not much of a factor because it's such a big game. So we've got the 7-6-3 flop, which is quite funny because I recorded a video for the BluffTheSpot Lab yesterday, and I actually reviewed a hand where the board was 7-4-3 flush draw, and it was a really big pot. So we talked about check raising the flop. Anyway, so we get this board which is pretty good for limitless. He's probably going to have 5-4 offsuit quite often, even 5-4 suited maybe. He's going to have some 2 pairs and 1 pairs and all kinds of draws and overcards with decent equity. So he gets to be pretty aggressive here. So this board is not very good for Linus, but it's not terrible, right? Again, he probably open raises 5-6 offsuit and obviously 3, 7, 6s, aces, kings, all the good stuff, ace 5 of spades. So Linus is doing fine here. But I definitely do not expect him to bet his full range. I expect him to have quite a few check behinds here. And Linus. So Linus decides to bet somewhat large, 331 in the 490. Okay. So he's saying, hey, I'm not just betting any 2 here. I've got a bit of a stronger range, so I'm going to size up, which seems like a good play. Once my computer allows him to raise. Calls. Okay. So calling is going to be limitless's most common option, but he'll probably be check raising this board somewhere between 10 and 25% of the time. And this 7 changes so much, right? The flush got there, full house is filled up. Obviously, a 7 is a likely card for both players, so Linus is likely going to use some like pretty big, but definitely under pot sizing. So let's see. I'm guessing it's somewhere between like 600 and 900. And I'm wrong. All right. It's fun to see that I'm wrong. Doesn't necessarily mean that my suggestion doesn't work, but he basically chooses a small sizing and he's saying, hey, I know Limitless, I know you've got a lot of weaker draws and I'm putting them in a tough spot out of position. I'm forcing you to call with a lot of weaker value hands, like for instance a 6, etc. So Linus is really using his position here. He's a little bit afraid of the 7 and the flush, but at the same time he feels like protection and getting thin value are very important. So my guess is that Linus doesn't only implement this bet size, he probably also has some kind of larger sizing. And when you're as good as a guy like Linus, you get to use many sizes in different spots because you have an idea of what you're doing. That's a strategy that I wouldn't always recommend because it's very difficult to implement, right? Using multiple sizes in many different spots, but it definitely does work if you know what you're doing. So it's basically high risk, high reward. Limitless calls. So once he only calls his third pot bet, his range is going to be pretty weak. He's going to slow play some full houses and flushes, of course, but against his wide betting range, he's usually going to raise them. And this queen of spades definitely favors Linus. Linus is far more likely to have hands like queen 7 or pocket queens or the ace or king high or jack high flush. So Linus is going to be quite aggressive on this river. And let's see what he does. So, as I said, Linus gets to be aggressive and he uses basically a full pot bet size, minus $3, always with the hip sizes. Yeah. So limitless, he's going to call a pretty tight range here. He realizes that he doesn't have too many really good hands. He's going to float some hands like king of spades 10 on the flop and then on the turn, and he'll obviously call those. He'll have some random full houses and ace high flushes, but he's not doing super well. Or maybe he even check raises. Let's see. I have no idea what's going to happen. And he goes for the pretty small check raise, so he's saying he's got basically the ace high flush or better. And Linus shoves all in. I think that if Limitless had the king of spades against a pot size to bet, he wouldn't raise. So I'm not sure Linus would be shoving the ace of spades looking to get called by the king of spades. I think the ace of spades obviously is ahead far too often to be folding, but once you shove and get called, you're also getting called by full houses. So I think Linus mainly represents full houses at this point. Let's see. Limitless calls, and wow, that's pretty sick. That's a pretty sick cooler. So Limitless calls pre-flop with ace-6, which seems fine. He calls the flop. You can probably raise your hand occasionally, but calling is definitely the standard play. On the turn, same thing. You could basically check raise to get some value and protection, potentially turn your hand into a bluff on later streets, but calling is definitely the standard play. And on the river, you just have to check raise with the ace of spades. This is a very aggressive game, so when Linus pots the river, he can not only have the king high flush, but he could also maybe have the jack high flush or maybe even the 10 high flush. So is it a snap raise by Limitless? It is a clear raise. It is not absolutely printing money because Limitless shouldn't only have the best hand, but he also has to get called by a worse hand. It is definitely a check raise. And then once he gets shoved on, he's thinking, hey, my 6 is actually pretty convenient because now I block 7-6, which Linus will play in this manner quite often, and I block hands like pocket sixes. So he's thinking, well, not only do I have the nut flush, so if I fold this hand, I'm probably folding quite a bit because I also may have some bluffs, right? Obviously he will. Limitless is a fantastic player, but he will not only fold his bluffs, but if he folds an ace with a pair, then he's going to be overfolding, and he believes that Linus is obviously a very capable player who can turn hands into a bluff. So I'll give Limitless I'll give him a 7.5 out of 10. I'll give Linus I'll give him a 9 out of 10. I mean, I feel a bit weird commenting on players who are superior heads up, right? But it's my stream, and I get to give a rating, so I'll give Linus a 9 out of 10. I think, obviously, his open raise is good. I like the c-bet with the, nuts plus redraw. On the turn, you can do a million things, but he's basically thinking, well, I've got a weaker flush on a paired board, so if I ever want to be tricky, then, might as well bet this one, whereas maybe if you have a hand like king 5 of spades, or king deuce of spades, or whatever, then you go for the larger sizing, if he in fact has one. And on the river, Linus is saying, hey, I got a big flush, and obviously shoves the nuts over a check raise. So, yeah, really sweet play. I'll give him a 9+, actually. It's a really good play. So everything about it just seems good. Everything about it just seems good, as you'd expect. So, very fun first hand. What do you guys think of this one?
All right, everyone. That has been it for me. What do you think about the hands? Let me know in the comments down below. I also wanted to say thank you for your support throughout the year. You are all amazing. I wish you a successful and healthy new year. Also, don't forget to grab my 100% free training before it expires. The link is in the description down below. See you next year. Thanks for watching.